floral way of saying the owners. I mean, I wouldn't even call them the military and industrial complex. It's the bankers. It's a whole, and it's really a whole secret kind of thing, that, not to sound conspiratorial, but they can fund things unlimitedly, and God only knows what they've really got. And,
this person told me that whatever you think we have, he said, add about 20 years to it. And
exactly. That's what I hear, about 15 years.
Yeah. And he said, it's kind of scary. So, I mean, but what I was getting at, do you want to say anything about, have you ever done a reading of the leader of North Korea and figured out what's in store for him?
No, I have not.
Might be a good thing not to.
Well, I don't really care. What's he going to do? Anyways, I think the guy, I don't care if he likes it or not, he's been hideous to people. What he did to Wambier, do you know that they pulled all his teeth out and put him back in different places?
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, it was horrible what they did to that guy. And then they ship him over here. I mean, it was really horrible what they've done to so many people.
Well,
throughout history, we hear about these despots doing this. I mean, they're all Nazis. They're nuts. And, evil, that's an interesting thing, because when you really take it out of North Korea and all this, it's really a force in this planet that is always playing itself out and dissipating. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the philosophy behind, or the divine philosophy behind, the principles of Vedantic astrology and the ancient traditional astrology, is it really said the solar system is a spiritual matrix. I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. There's an old legend that the guardian angel ties our soul to the embryo at conception. And the 9 months of gestation is the converse of your spirit or soul with that angel. And there's many levels to that. And upon first breath, when you exit the womb, most children cry. There's some really magical stuff that happens there. They say the guardian angel actually ties the spirit or soul into the physical body, but that first breath also has a physical imprint of all the atomic energy that's present. And when I say atomic, I mean the whole imprint of that moment is the celestial energies. And when you look at astrology, the critics will say, well, but there's many people who are Pisces and Aries. That is so wrong, because when you look at the precession of the equinoxes, our solar system is rocketing around a central sun at about 500 million miles an hour. Some people say it's somewhere around 480,000 miles an hour. Our solar system's going around another sun. And you could never get the same chart twice. It's absolutely impossible. When you take the rotations of the planets, the tropical zodiac, the sidereal zodiac, the fixed stars, and this is just what the human mind can comprehend. And what I loved about the richness of the ancient techniques in astrology is it all boils down into angels and spiritual intelligences and divine things that are actually in the Bible. And in fact, the Bible itself, if you decode it, particularly in Aramaic or Hebrew, there are ciphers and codes in that actually you can derive names of angels, particularly in Exodus and in other areas of the Psalms, and actually quite a few areas that are really amazing. You can't make this stuff up. And there are classes of angels, many secret societies, Masonic, particularly Rosicrucian, the Kabbalistic society, and they knew that there was these 72 angels that ruled the quintessences, and then there's 42 and 24 and 12. It's amazing. It's absolutely beyond human comprehension. And this, when you speak to someone in science about this, they just laugh. They say, well, how can that be? You can't look at creation through a three-dimensional five-sense lens. And even the quantum physicists, who I think I have great respect for, are getting much closer. They're beginning to say, something exceedingly intelligent holding all this together. I mean, when you look at matter as science currently understands it, is molecular structures into molecules, which then form into a myriad of combinations. And of course, the plastic on your computer screen or your iPhone versus, the air we're breathing is just energy of different combinations of atoms of different polarities, positive, negative charges, and much more than that. And what's holding that all together in such a orderly state? And even science has to bow to genetics. I mean, we can splice DNA, but try creating it and ensouling it once, and that's a little bit beyond where we can go.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, you're overwhelming me, you know that. So the average...
It overwhelms us all.
Yeah.
I'm just referring to how overwhelming creation is. It's exceedingly complex and divine, and anyone with an IQ above room temperature has to concede that. Even the skeptic, who's a scientist, who doesn't believe, the atheist still has to say creation of and by itself is astounding.
Yeah. Wow. I was going to ask you what's the difference between what you do? What all can you do? I mean, if a person comes in, I mean, is it basically you can steer them with their life path and stuff like that? Can you predict their future a little bit?
In a personal reading, that's what I do. In a personal reading, which is really comprehensive, I look at the entire life path using Vedic astrology, which I really like because Vedic astrology, I think, has it right that we created the time, the celestial energies that our soul is joined to the physical body. You can see your parents in it. You can see past lives. You can see the gender you were. You can see so many amazing things. Like I always get clients saying to me, well, how did you know my mom was like that, or my dad was like that, or this was like that? And I said, because it's in the chart. And at first they're all amazed with me, and I'm going, well, don't deify me. I just spent 40-something years studying this stuff and still am studying it. And I humbly submit that if anyone else does it, they'll figure it out too. I think what we do know about astrology and what I know is just infinitesimal compared to what really is going on. But it's amazing to look at that. So in a reading, I love to start with that, and then I like to look at the cycles, which are called progressions and transits and primary directions, because they really are the unfoldment of the energy for people. And it's been amazing. Like I've had people who I would tell things to, and I could tell that they didn't believe me, or they thought, how could that be? And then I would get the email or the phone call back several years later when it came to fruition, and they're like, oh my God, it was right. And they would say, oh, you're right. I said, no, the astrology was right. I'm just blessed enough to be able to read it as accurate as I can. And thank God for the tools that I have now. I mean, God, when my mother and I first started this, we were casting charts by hand, And in fact, in Vedic astrology, I was casting charts by hand into the 90s. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Yogi Bhajan. Yogi Bhajan was he had I think it was called the H2O holistic approach to drug abuse, and he'd prescribe. He was a yogi from India and very famous, and he ended up dying in Espanola about 2004. I used to teach at Vedic astrology at his Yoga West in West LA, and it was so fun because we would get into these conversations in the teachings about how divine it all is, and how the unfoldment of your cycles, even though if you don't believe it, they're going to happen. And the value of knowing it is you change your outlook on life. It's kind of like if someone told you that, you were going to have an energy come at you X amount of years, months, or whatever it is ahead, that gives you a foresight to be able to say, wow, that's cool, because I want to do something with that. And free will really does play into it. I think free will is exceedingly active and powerful, because I've seen people really change, like that psychiatrist I told you about before. He threw the medication in the garbage can. He called me back later. About 6 months later, he says, I'm off the meds. I said, well, good for you. He says, I still feel this energy, but he says, I've really changed my outlook towards it. He says, it's actually become like a challenge for me to be able to survive in this kind of emotional energy. I said, I know. See, that's what martial arts teaches us. In fact, that's what good driving skills teach you. Everyone's taken a driver's ed class, right? And what they teach you is to look for adversity and react to it appropriately. That's why you got a steering wheel, brake, and a gas pedal, right? So and directionals in 4 ways. Whatever comes at you, you want to be able to react as adequately as possible. And that's what I love about readings for people, is because once I go through their life path and look at the progressions and transits, and then I kind of end up in where they're at now, and then the location astrology is astounding. I've had people move to places, and it's really made a difference. It's made a difference in my life. I can tell you I've lived in many places, and I can absolutely say location astrology is so accurate, it's creepy. And one of the beautiful things about the USA is you can go anywhere you want. I mean, you can sell a house, you can move, you can go get a job somewhere else, and you can change your life. And some people are in really good locations, and I tell them, they may be having bad cycles. Don't move, because it's not the location; it's just the cycles you're in. So, and I give what I love today about readings is the internet has helped me and the clients I work with so much, because what I do is I send people a code, and they double click on it. They're right into my computer, and I literally have like a movie of all these different things that I show on their birth chart. I explain a lot of things. I show their cycles and give a lot of examples, and they get to screen record it. Mac computers do an elegant job of screen recording, and the PC can too if you download certain programs that do screen recording, and there's several out there.
Uh-huh.
And so you have a movie of your session, and it takes the mystery out of astrology. People really start to see where it fits in and the logic of it, because it's actually very scientific and very geometric. And, most people are surprised to hear that all the planetary icons or glyphs actually come out of the ancient ending of the Lord's Prayer. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever.
Uh-huh.
And all those planetary glyphs are combinations of the sun, the moon, and the cross. And in other words, the circle of the sun, the crescent of the moon, and the cross. If you look at every single glyph in the planets, they are all combinations of that.
Now, you mentioned you had bankers come to you and lawyers and, medical people. If a person came to you and said, hey, I want to know if I should invest, is this the right time to invest, or should I hold off investing? Yep. Can you help them on that?
That's another type of astrology, and it's probably one of the oldest. People forget, until the 1800s, there was not even time zones. In fact, it was even later than that. But that's when time really started getting organized in terms of clock time and various places. I think it was about 1883. There was some event where it passed in the United States, where they were actually sectioning off the zones and saying these are the time zones. And it was all established out of Greenwich, England, which is, of course, where longitude and latitude is referenced from,
uh-huh.
even though it's the equator as well and the poles. But here's the interesting thing. The prior to the 1800s, or I would even say the early 1900s, people didn't have their birth times. So they would use a type of astrology called interrogation. Now, many Western astrologers have heard of that as horary. That's the Latin